All righty. All right, starting to see a few folks trickle in. Welcome, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. Everyone is nice and on time. Love that. All right, we'll get started in about 2 minutes. Keeping an eye on the clock here. Would love to, as people come in, tell us where you're watching from in the chat. Would love to know. How's your weather, Frank? Is it a nice day in St. Petersburg?
It is like toggling between cloudy and sunshiny, but it's
Okay,
85. And so I'm counting my blessings today. The fact that it's
great.
85 is a
Yeah,
miracle.
beautiful. Love that. And hey, Trish from Vegas. I'm in Nashville. We're having fake fall. We got a few days of crisp mornings, but I think it's about to go away.
We're having that in Seattle too. It's crazy. My daughter's at soccer camp this week and it's perfect. It's like in the 70s.
Love that. We're getting a taste. All right. Well, thank you everyone so much for joining. We're right at the hour, so we can start this wonderful webinar. If you haven't already, feel free to drop in the chat where you're joining us from. And looking forward to this conversation today. Before we jump into the content, if you are joining us, we know you must have a passion for sales coaching. Ambition has a conference every year in October in beautiful Nashville when it's actually real fall. So it is the best weather of the year. We have it at Brooklyn Bowl, which is an amazing music venue. It's an awesome place to come to combine a little bit of work and a little bit of networking and fun. So if interested, we will send you some more info, but this is a wonderful event full of sales, ops, enablement leaders who are all there to talk about sales coaching and best practices and helping your teams achieve. So we would love to see you there. Our panels are shaping up really nicely. So we have workshops with some great trainers. We have panels with industry experts. So the faces on this slide you can expect to see with some others as well. So we'll keep you posted as we get closer. All right, so today I will be talking with two experts on how to elevate your win rates with precise, always on sales coaching. So, very timely as we're getting closer and closer to 2025. So, getting ahead of those sales targets. We encourage you today, please use the chat. If you have questions, we'll monitor throughout and can absolutely take your questions, which we will also do at the end. So to get started, I'll introduce myself and then pass to our panelists. My name is Kelly Berg. I lead the customers organization at Ambition. If you are familiar with Ambition, you'll know this, but we are a sales performance platform. So we use data, AI, your reps' insights into how they feel their performance is going to blend together a beautiful picture for your sales managers of exactly what's happening with their teams and how they can improve outcomes, coach their reps, motivate their reps, and then recognize achievement. So this is very much in our wheelhouse. I get to spend a lot of my time talking to wonderful sales and enablement leaders on how they improve their team's coaching and their win rates. So, very in line with what we're talking about today, which is fun. And I have two esteemed panelists with me who are experts in this field as well. So, I will start and pass the mic to Frank to tell you a little bit about him and about RevShop.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Kelly. And I got to tell you, it's a pleasure to be smack dab in the middle of the Kelly sandwich. I can't tell you how much I appreciate that. My name is Frank Pender. I am the president here at RevShop. I work cross-functionally across our entire business, so I get to a flavor and a slice of just every bit of what we do. At our essence and at our core, we're really focused in the enterprise space with like very large enterprise companies, usually Fortune 1000, Fortune 500. And what we're helping them do is build go-to-market plans and processes that align to their sales technology. And what I would feel fairly passionate about is that the technology is amazing and incredible and it can do just remarkable things, but it's only as good as the process that enables that technology to be successful. And so that's our sweet spot. We focus on enabling those organizations to build an optimized process to align to their technology. So it's great to be here, and great to see you all. And back to the Kelly sandwich. Over to you, Kelly.
Thanks, Frank. Hello, everyone. So excited to be here. I'm Kelly Lewis, Vice President of Revenue Enablement at HighSpot. If you're not familiar with HighSpot, we are an enablement platform. So yes, I have a very meta role, enablement at enablement. We're really a single platform for all of your enablement initiatives, how you're running your go-to-market initiatives through the pipes and making sure that you've got the right leading indicators to make sure you're driving the business outcomes you're seeking. So excited to be here. I'm also a former sales leader, so I'm going to come a little bit with that thought process as we talk through everything.
Amazing. Enablement squared. Enablement
Yes,
at the enablement company. I love this.
it's fun.
No pressure, right? Yeah.
Just a little bit, but that's okay.
Amazing. Okay. Uh-oh, my slide's getting hung up. I hope everyone could see it. Did it freeze for you all or just for me?
Going back and forth a little bit, but
Okay.
we
Okay.
can see the words.
Great. Okay. Hopefully we'll land on this here. So of framing up this conversation, we're taking the study done by Corporate Visions that over half of closed loss deals could be attributed to issues within the sales experience. So this resonated, this brought it home for us that if we can correct those issues in the sales experience through amazing coaching, through proactive coaching, through coaching that is in the moment and maybe not looking back at last quarter, those win rates are going to go up and your reps are going to close more deals. We're going to hit more goals and the outcomes are going to be better. So this is sort of the table stakes for what we're going to talk about today. All right. So Ambition did a survey this month, actually, talking to sales and enablement leaders to see what sales skills are your reps struggling with the most. And the feedback we got was pretty interesting. So there was definitely a clear number one here on pipeline. So building their own pipeline and outbounding. We're hearing a lot of the no decision, which I think we're going to have some thoughts on what does a no decision actually mean. A little bit on discovery, and then a hodgepodge in the other category. So maybe getting hung up on procurement, an expected close date, etc. So I'm going to pass it to Frank first to get his thoughts on this feedback that we heard from sales leaders and if this resonates.
You know, when I first looked at this data with you last week, and I was kind of interpreting it and thinking through it, I was thinking through it through the lens of a practitioner. So I spend so much time with our customers and thinking through some of these challenges. And I was like, you know what? This is spot on, actually. I would say this is exactly the experience that they're having. That pipeline really is the number one thing that they're struggling with. And I think the other part that's connected to that is the ability to forecast. And so we've also seen a really big focus on pipeline accuracy. And that's really been at the heart of a lot of our conversations. And all that starts with an accurate, up-to-date, clean pipeline. So this was no surprise to me. And it's kind of like the precursor, if you will, to being able to have a good and accurate forecast. Closing. So I completely and wholeheartedly agree with this. I was trying to poke holes in it when you and I were talking last week to be like, what's the like controversial perspective on this one?
Yeah,
And honestly, I don't have one because I think this is a really good, accurate representation of where we're at today.
love
Kelly,
it.
super curious about your thoughts on this one.
So I have two big takeaways from this. One, whenever I see pipeline as a concern, I always ask, is it a skill or is it a will issue? And I think that's actually why coaching is so important because you can uncover whether it is the skill issue or it is the will issue. I oftentimes find it is a will issue, and that they don't have the belief that the activities they're doing will result in pipeline. And so by using coaching, I think you can actually establish what's that percentage? Is this individual just really struggling with whether or not they want to do this, or is this a skill? The other thing that I don't see here that I think aligns a little bit to no decision in discovery is, and it actually relates to this last slide we looked at with the 53%. Um, CVI, Corporate Visions, is our methodology, and they have a concept of the cost of not changing and being able to use discovery to make sure people understand the need to change. And I think in our market landscape right now, um, people are sensitive. They're thinking about tech consolidation. They're thinking about all of the different things. And so, whatever your product is, they need to realize that by not moving or not changing, there is a cost associated with that. And I don't know that we've gotten, or a lot of companies have gotten really good at landing that through their discovery. And so, you're seeing an increase in no decision.
Yeah. Good call out. I know, Frank, you and I talked a little bit about no decision too. Is it actually a no decision? Give me your thoughts here. Uh-oh, Frank, I
Oh,
think
you're on
you're
mute.
muted.
I'm on mute. That would be helpful. Sorry about that. What I
You
was going to
bet.
say is, I think a lot of times what we see is we think or we believe that deals end in no decision, but we don't actually understand the real reason behind what happened. And oftentimes we lose track in the buying process, or our buyer goes dark and we don't understand what actually ended up happening. I would say there are two things that happen really frequently that are behind the scenes we just never know about. The first is they decide to do it internally. They're like, oh, we're going to do this with you, with a partner. And they just decide, actually, you know what, we can't justify the cost, or the cost actually would be greater than for us to do it internally. So we're actually still going to do this, but we're going to do it ourselves. Or alternatively, oftentimes what we see happen is they just quit replying to, or they quit kind of go dark in the sales process, but they end up going with a competitor. And then you find out, I don't know, 6 months, 9 months, 12 months down the road. So I always think about no decision as like, really, is there no decision? And I always focus from a coaching perspective on the why. Like, why was there no decision? Is it the initiative's dead? Is it that you don't want to do this anymore? Like, you had a problem, you had a pain in your business. Well, what are you going to do to solve it? And usually, no decision is this surface level thing, and there's something else behind it.
Yep. Agreed. Totally.
I think you could also say there, like, did they qualify it correctly?
Right.
If it's going to no decision, it probably means that you weren't power threaded, meaning you weren't at a level of power within the organization to actually make a decision and to actually have budget. Um, I think that tends to be a trend there.
Yeah. Great call outs. Okay, so then the next question for these leaders was how are they identifying the skill gap today? So we know that pipeline is one. We know that there is an issue potentially with the no decision. So what are they doing about it? And what we're seeing is a little bit more of an equal mix here, but a lot is based on lagging indicators. So kind of looking back at a rep's win rate, looking back at maybe what happened the previous quarter, the anecdotes or the sentiments. So in that coaching one-on-one, what the rep is reporting back, a lot are using the talk trends. So using conversation intelligence to watch the call, get the feedback or the summaries of the calls. And then some are at the mixed bag and that other 19%. So pipeline review, AI coaching, top of funnel metrics. So again, it's pretty spread out here. Kelly, would love your takeaway on this slide.
Yeah, so I think when I look at this, you have to think about, are they actually asking the reps? Are the reps aware of where their gaps are? And so we have something we call Voice of the Field, which is an initiative where we listen to our reps via our revenue advisory board or in one-on-one conversations. We also run a field confidence survey. So while it is reactive, it at least allows us to ask those questions. The other interesting thing about that is they'll never tell their manager where they're struggling, but they tend to tell enablement where they're struggling. So it depends on who's asking the question there. Um, I also think when you look at this and you try to compile where you want to better enable your reps, you have to have a skills and competencies model to understand what skills and competencies they need to be successful. And I often find that this is a level of maturity for most organizations that they're just not at yet. And so the investment in creating a skills and competencies model where you can align different skills so that you can create coaching plans for them is very important.
Yep, that prep work to be able to have your managers go execute. Yeah, that's huge.
Absolutely.
Frank, what are you thinking?
So I'm not at all, again, surprised by this one, but I think there's so much room organizationally for us to get better. And the reason I say that is I'm a huge fan of like win-loss analysis and understanding like why did we win deals? Why did we lose deals? And then incorporating that back into a feedback engine to get better over time. The problem with that, however, is that if we're using win rates as the primary way of identifying skill gaps, the reality is we don't have time to intervene in the deal to make a difference in the outcome. And so while win rates are helpful as a lagging indicator, I would love to see our industry start to move to this like talk trends and really this other bucket, because that's where the real magic is going to start to happen. And that's where we're really going to start to harness the available applications and tools that we've made investments in, our revenue tools, where they have the ability to have us do this. And oftentimes most organizations I find have this capability. They purchased it, they've acquired it, they have it, but they're not taking advantage of it. And so things like talk trends, for example, yes, a talk trend, again, interesting, but connecting that talk trend back to a revenue outcome is really where the magic happens. So if a rep is doing this very specific thing in this deal and I have the ability to intervene based on that talk trend, before I get to a win rate or a close rate, that's like the power, that's the magic. And there are really, really awesome tools on the market today. And you kind of describe it here in this bottom right-hand corner, AI powered coaching that can surface those things ahead of time. So I have an indicator to know not only that an intervention needs to happen, but I can get really precise and specific about what type of intervention needs to happen so that ultimately I can change the outcome of the deal. So while win rates are awesome and amazing, and they help provide a lot of, let's just say, hindsight, which is always 2020, it's always amazing to try to think about how do we harness the tools that we already have, or think about how to intervene before that outcome actually takes place.
Yeah, I love that because it's kind of the yes and like, yes, we know these things are important and it is so important to incorporate that, especially at the broader scale of understanding the win rates. But we got to do that and some other things to get in the midst of the deal and put it back on track before it's gone. All right. Okay, so there's some context. So our summary coming out of this, basically just what Frank said, which is the reactive approach to coaching really isn't enough to fix the performance problem in the moment and be able to actually intervene. So the win rate, the anecdote, the talk trend, we have to do all those things. But what else should we add to this to be more in the moment with our sales coaching? So, we're going to chat through a little bit more of the philosophy in these four buckets. So, there's obviously a role that is critical, the manager's role. I think all of us can probably identify with. We have some folks who are amazing managers who've been doing it for years and maybe have a methodology and a ton of experience. Some also have maybe that great AE who was just promoted into their first management role and they've never done this before. So, how can we use those tools? What should their role be? How can they be a great coach? We'll talk through some of the metrics that matter. So, kind of going beyond that win rate, systems and process, which we know is really important. And then, what outcome would you see as you start to incorporate these things? Why is this going to help? Okay, so like I said, we're going to start with that key role, the manager. Um, in the past, I would say a lot of the manager's role ends up being the data analyst. So pull your Salesforce reports, dig around a little bit, and doing more of that one size fits all coaching. So this is what I need to do with my reps. Every rep needs a one-on-one, a ride along, however that looks. And in the always on world, we're saying this manager needs to be more specialized, like a real coach, a real trainer. But the challenge is, how are we going to get someone there who maybe has never done it before, or who doesn't necessarily know how to be as specialized? Frank, I know you are very passionate about this topic, so let's talk about the status quo. How can this manager actually, help their reps improve and change those behaviors?
Oh, I have so many thoughts about this. Thanks for putting me in the hot seat out of the gate. One thing that comes to mind that we didn't talk about in kind of our sessions leading up to this is I feel like the manager is actually the person we always forget about to enable. We always think about coaching for the rep, coaching for the rep, coaching for the rep, and we often forget that the manager actually needs to be enabled to coach the rep effectively. And we kind of leave it up to their own devices to be able to do that. And so the manager's role is actually critical because they're the steering that enables you to move the needle in your sales organization. And I love how it says data analyst, one size fits all coaching plan. That's the truth, I feel like, of what most organizations are living in with today. And the reality is that when you look at the data in our industry, it's extremely clear. The data says that the number one thing you can do to increase performance in your sales organization is coaching. But it's the number one thing that managers don't want to do, and they find the least amount of time to do. And I guarantee you, if you ask your managers, if you have managers, like what consumes most of your time? Most of the time, people say, the data analysis. I'm creating another Salesforce dashboard. I'm creating a new report. I'm creating a new way of looking at my metrics. And they're spending so much time doing the one thing that doesn't actually lead to an increase in win rates, right? And so agree, like moving from this reactive model to this always on model is really, really helpful and valuable. The other thing, and I'll leave a bit for mystery in some of the other slides, but the other thing that we see where managers really fail is they try to treat every single person on their team the exact same way. So they say like, hey, I'm going to treat my new person with a coaching plan the exact same way that I treat my absolute rock star who's killing it. And I'm going to treat my middle of the roader who just kind of is always at 80% of quota the same way as I'm going to treat a bottom performer. And the reality is that coaching cannot be one size fits all, because every single person on the team has a very selective set of things that they need to focus on. And so where we really see the magic happen in coaching is when you start tailoring or customizing your approach based on the unique needs of that individual. And the easiest way to do that is to classify them based on their performance. What do we all want to do as salespeople? We want to take our bottom of the pack and make them our middle of the pack. We want to take our middle of the pack and we want to make them the top of the pack. The easiest way to classify them are into those three buckets, and then coach specifically to what their strengths or weaknesses are to move the needle in your performance spectrum. All right, that's enough for me. Kelly, I'm super curious to hear your perspective on this one.
So when I look at this, I think you have to have a coaching framework. You made a really smart comment earlier, Kelly, around you've got these superstar, rockstar AEs that go into manager roles, and they know how to do the thing. They've proven that they were rockstar AEs, but they haven't proven that they're really strong managers. And so the first thing you need to do in that world is give them a coaching framework. That way, no matter, regardless what they need to coach to, they have a method and a process to do that. We use the GROW coaching framework, which allows us to say, okay, pipeline's the issue. Let's go have the coaching conversation. You might not be super confident in your ability to coach to pipeline, but you're good at building pipeline. And so as long as you have a framework to understand how to have the conversation and how to coach, any topic can be used in that way. And so it's like the quickest switch to get those superstar early in career managers into coaching on a regular basis.
I love that. I see we got a question in the Q&A too. So asking, can the panelists expand on how they balance manager coaching with rep enablement? So is it on a schedule? Is it simultaneous? Do you do manager first, trickle down to rep? Like Kelly, I'd love for you to tell us how that functions for you guys.
So we do manager first, and I think this is a big trend in enablement. Everyone's been talking about it. The difference between a mature manager enablement program and a less mature manager enablement program is the ability to teach the coaching. So we don't just enable managers first and ask for their feedback. We actually practice coaching. We will pull up media intelligence calls, conversation intelligence calls. We will listen to them as a group. We will provide feedback as a group so that they understand what good coaching looks like, what we establish is what good looks like across the organization before we roll it out to reps. Managers need to feel confident that they have the ability to help their reps through the changes that enablement's running. And so putting them in a position to actually learn to coach to the thing is the important thing, not just the knowledge transfer, which is what I think a lot of organizations are starting with, which is great. But I think that next step is actually coaching to it.
That is such an interesting point too, with the confidence that your manager can help you coach to change. The manager needs to feel like they can do this, they've practiced this, they're competent at this. Frank, I know the change management piece, like coaching the behavior change, is a big passion of yours. Tell me how you walk an organization through that. If it's a framework or a new skill, you have to enable these managers to go enable your reps. How does that look for you?
Totally. Well, two parts. I would, to add on what Kelly was saying, Kelly, you nailed it. That was an amazing response. That's like the perfect response. I would just add one minor thing, which is, in my experience, the thing that we struggle with the most around coaching is consistency and persistency. Like what we see is it fall off, and having this regular coaching cadence and ultimately the discipline. That's what it takes. The discipline to continue to commit to that schedule of doing those things over and over and over again is the hardest. And when you commit to doing those things over and over again, what happens is the sum of all those parts is where the impact actually occurs. It's like we do one coaching session or two coaching sessions, we expect them miraculously to get better, and then they don't, and then we're disappointed. But the reality is it takes hard work, and it takes a lot of consistency and persistency. So just to kind of add on what she was saying, when we talk about coaching, though, like what I would say, there's a level above coaching, which is what we're really asking people to do is change. That's what we're asking them to do. We're asking them to do something different than what they did before. And human behavior is really tough, and change is really hard. And getting somebody to do something different is really hard, especially if they've been doing this for 10 or 20 years and they're kind of got that like baked into their DNA. So I would raise the argument, and there's lots of different ways to approach change management, but I would raise the argument of one thing to always keep inside of the back of your mind, as whether it's a manager, whether it's a rep, whether whoever it is that you're coaching, what you're really trying to get them to do is change. And what people don't like to do is change. And so how do you bring that into the conversation, or into the spirit of the conversation that you're having, and be delicate in the way in which you're asking that person to change?
Yep. I think that feeds in really well to this next topic too, which is the metrics that matter. So if we're coaching to change, what should we be looking at to see, is this working? And it goes back to the discipline too. So instead of just looking on the predictive revenue side, activity matters, the dials, the meetings, the opportunity progression, that certainly matters. That is foundational. But if we're in this always on world, actually having the discipline of looking at, are my managers coaching? Are we lifting some of these core KPIs that are not just activity? Are my reps win rates improving? Like that is what you'll start to see if you're doing this always on coaching and, really strong enablement model. So yeah, Frank, I'll stick with you on this actually. As you're thinking about, what do you tell these organizations to track? How can they remain disciplined? When will you see this change? What should you be looking at to make sure you know that this enablement is occurring for these reps?
Yeah, thank you. That's a great question. I would say, first of all, on the left-hand side, reactive, I'm a big fan of sales math. Sales math works, actually. Like if you do, it's an input, output, it's a math equation. If you do this number of things, you get this number back, right? The problem is kind of dovetailing to the last slide, is we always take this one size fits all approach.
Mhm.
Not everybody can reach the same outcome in the exact same way. And so sales math, yes, it works, but it's really dependent on what that person's skill set or strengths are.
Yep.
And in some ways, we want to help them to bolster or double down through coaching on their skills, on their strengths. And we want to help them move the needle on their weaknesses. But we also don't want to ask people that are oranges to become bananas, if that makes sense. Like no matter how hard they want to become a banana, they're just an orange. But that's okay. You know what? Oranges are super tasty too, just like bananas. You probably just don't want to put peanut butter on an orange. That's kind of gross, right? So, but you get the point. You get the point.
Yeah.
So on the other side of the equation, really we get obsessed, like we're obsessed with metrics right now in our industry. There are more metrics and more KPIs than there's ever been available to us in the history of the world, and there's more coming with AI. And so the reality is that we get so obsessed and focused on these metrics, but the reality is, and this is my personal view, it's all about the discipline and the
Mhm.
consistency. Of course, you have to have an amazing coaching framework. Like I love what Kelly said. You can't just like show up and do garbage coaching and expect a good outcome. But sometimes we get obsessed about like how do we get really detailed and quantifying this and moving the needle on all these things, and we skip the basics. And what I see most organizations struggle with 10 times out of 10 is just doing the basics of committing to that regular discipline and that regular schedule, and then being really proactive in those conversations about the very specific things that that person needs to do to move the needle for them. And the reality is it's different for everybody. Some people may be very, very good at closing, but they are terrible at the top of the funnel. Or alternatively, some people are great openers and they can just razzle dazzle anybody into a conversation, but then they get to the middle of the funnel and it just all falls apart. And so the reality is we're all different, and we have to meet people where they're at, and meet them to their strengths and meet them to their weaknesses to help progress them along. That's my 2 cents on this one.
Yeah, no, I love that. Kelly, when you're thinking about this for your teams, is it a similar approach?
So the one metric that I'm see that is missed here is there an established coaching plan for each of your reps? I think it's very easy to hold coaching sessions about all the different things that are happening in the business. But if you really want to make a behavior change, you have to stick to a specific skill for a while. And so my recommendation is that you first establish that there is a coaching plan for each individual rep, and that might look very different. The other advice I have here is we run a quarterly learning path for our teams that kind of sums up all of the enablement we're running for a quarter. And within that, we have different coaching moments where managers go into the system, either look at practice recordings, they look at media intelligence, where they actually are using a standardized rubric to coach and provide feedback to the reps. That way we can establish that behavior. Every time we are doing a behavior change, you need to coach to it. And so it's kind of a forced function at first, hoping that once they get into the regular routine of having these conversations with their reps that we're monitoring, it will happen without us. And so it's that
That's,
stepping stone
yeah,
of getting them there.
I think that's a
And then we
great
can
point.
report on it too.
Right. It's a great point for managers too, who maybe are newer to the role or just people who might not be as comfortable with giving feedback. The rubric and that sort of tool is like a good forcing function to help someone who may be uncomfortable with it. Just, well, I'm doing the thing. I'm giving you the feedback in this framework. So like that is a great tool for that manager who may be reluctant to share the bad news or have to, give some candid feedback on a skill.
I also think that showing what good looks like is such a
Mm.
key to coaching. And when you're doing a formalized program like we've established, we actually can get those highest scores and then surface those what good look like examples to the reps and to the managers so that they can have more detailed coaching conversations around the different things that make that a what good looks
hmm
like.
The peer modeling is powerful too
So
for someone to be able to go back and kind of watch that call and, okay, I'm going to take that from this person and this from this person who's great. Love that. Frank, anything else that's coming to mind on some of the metrics that you're thinking about?
I don't think so. Not on this
Okay,
one. I
cool.
feel like we got a good 360 view on the
Yeah.
metrics that matter.
Beautiful. So that leads us into the process, which I think we're starting to dip a toe into the process as well. Things like that rubric, those tools that managers use. So when we think of the status quo, maybe some of the more reactive ways, so thinking about incentives, so maybe the spiff incentive, the comp management, still obviously important, and that tends to work. Activity tracking, let's bump up your calls, your emails, the internal business review, the look back. So like let's look back at last quarter and we'll talk about wins and losses. Those things are definitely sort of the standard and very important. But the new world of all of these cool tools, all of these processes that bring AI, like we've talked a little bit about that of how AI can really speed up the manager process. Maybe they don't have to watch 10 calls. Maybe they can have that summary done for them or summarize what that rep has been thinking about or worried about in those one-on-ones. We think about the personalized coaching. We think about even mid-call enablement, making sure that rep has access to what they need. Kelly, I'll start with you on this one for other systems, other processes that are really effective for you guys when you think about your 2024 enablement strategy.
AI is making this so much easier for our managers and taking so much of that heavy labor away and creating time efficiencies here. So
Mhm.
if I'm a frontline manager, where I'm spending my time is in meeting prep. So I see the mid-call enablement. I think that's great. I also think it can be distracting depending on how much it is. But I think there's so much that can be done about pre-call planning. And because you have all of this amazing AI data at your fingertips, if I'm a manager, I'm spending time with my reps, prepping for their next call, helping them think about how they're doing it and coaching them there so that they're walking in really competently. Again, it's that reactive versus always on. I think if you can do it ahead of the call versus always just, you know, poking holes and things that
Yeah.
happen afterwards, I think you're going to get a better reaction from the pre-call. And if that's where I'm going to spend my time, that's where I'm going to spend my time.
That feels like a great rep morale thing too, to not always be the like coulda, woulda, shoulda. I wish you'd
Yeah,
done this, and more like, hey, we're gonna set you up to tackle this the right way from the jump. So that feels good too, I think, morale wise.
absolutely.
Yeah. Frank, talk to me a little bit about systems and process.
I would say first and foremost, I'm with Kelly on the mid-call enablement. It's like if you don't already know the material and you're not
Yeah.
confident in that material ahead of the call, like something being surfaced to you immediately on the call could be more of a distraction or make you stumble through it a bit more.
Yep.
It's nice to have information accessible at your fingertips, don't get me wrong, but it's not a substitute for the hard work of actually like understanding deeply the concepts. There are really three things that come to mind for me on this in particular. The first one is really on the left-hand side about this activity tracking and these business reviews. What I've found in my experience so far is that half the battle is managing to an accurate set of data.
Hmm.
More often than not, what we see is the data is flawed, and if we're operating off of a flawed set of data, then we're really flying blind into a coaching conversation. And so, as a manager, as a leader, making sure that we're capturing the right type of data, it's in our systems so that we can coach and enable to that data is half the battle.
Hmm.
And as much as we want salespeople to put all of their information inside of their CRM, they're not ever going to do it. So, how do you work around that and make sure that you capture as much as you can? Um, the second thing around on now kind of moving to the other side, this always on this personalized coaching. There's a really simple way that I think about this, and this is actually it's kind of it's based on some research from Corporate Visions actually. And it was a study done by Professor Left Bonney, where he talks about segmentation inside of your sales organization. So think about it like this, like in its most simple form. Your lower performers are typically two types of profiles of people. One, it's a person who is brand new. Of course, they're a low performer. They're just getting started,
Yep.
right? The second type of profile is somebody who's like just hanging on by a thread. They're downright not compliant. They're probably on their way out the door. They're maybe on a performance improvement plan, or like the writing's on the wall. That's where they're headed. They're bottom of the pack, right? Then your middle of the pack is really kind of two different profiles. You have your middle of the rotors. Those are the people who are like 80% consistently achieving always 80%, right? Then you have basically like your sawtoothers. Like 1 month, they're like 120% of quota. And as a manager, like, my coaching work, I broke through. They're moving into the top tier. And then the next month, they're like 20% of quota. And you're like, what did I do wrong? Right? Like they're just this sawtooth in performance. Then on the far right side, you have your like absolute perennial powerhouses, your rock stars, the people that like are always crushing it no matter what. They're going to pull a rabbit out of the hat at every end of every quarter, and you know that they're going to do it. And then you have your consistent contenders who are always fighting for that number one spot. The reality is those profiles of people inside of an organization are so different than each other. Imagine trying to treat your middle of the road or 80%er the same way as your rock star.
Hmm.
The rock star, if you show up with a formalized coaching plan, they're going to be like, give me a break. Like, leave me alone. Like what I
Yep.
really need help on are these things. You're actually getting in the way of my deal, right? On the other hand, on the other side of the equation, like showing up with a brand new person and expecting them overnight to be that next like top tier performer is unrealistic. And so this personalized coaching and pairing that with the technology to be able to meet people in those moments is so important. Here's the last thing that I would say. I've seen this really bad habit start to happen in organizations around AI. AI is nothing short of freaking amazing. All right. But what I've seen happen is I've seen people start using it as shortcuts.
Hmm.
And there's no substitute for hard work. There's absolutely no substitute for hard work. And so I've seen people say, hey, I'm going to prep for this call and I'm going to read the call summary really quickly. And they show up. And you know what? Like it falls flat because they didn't put the hard work in. And so while AI is amazing, it can give you some like great bullet points and feedback. Like I'm a big advocate of re-listening back to the calls Like I'll listen to a call 2, 3 times over a week to make sure that I'm fluent. And so while I would say AI powered manager briefings and this technology is incredible, it is not a substitute for hard work, and you have to continue to put in the hard work to really move the needle.
Yeah.
That's I don't know. That's where I'm landing on all of this anyway.
I like that. It's a tool in the toolkit, but we always talk about balancing the AI and the HI, the human intelligence, that you got to keep that in the mix as well. Can't go all AI. Kelly, do you agree?
Oh, 100%.
Yeah. Okay. So in our perfect world here, we are doing this great personalized coaching. We're meeting the rep where they are. We have these frameworks so that our manager knows, hey, we have a discovery problem. I can spin up a good coaching moment for this rep. So we're feeling good and we're coming to the outcome. So we're going to paint the picture here. What should the dream outcome look like? What should you be looking at to see, are my coaching strategies working? And obviously, it's going to go beyond the sales math, the volume. We want the volume, we need the volume, and we need the math. But what does the always on coaching produce that goes beyond that? We love efficiency, human intelligence referenced here, the win rate getting better. I love thinking about, has my rep retention improved? And not only are my managers coaching, but is the coaching of a good quality? I think that is an exciting thing to develop your managers with, thinking about sort of all these systems, processes, tools you could give your manager. So Kelly, paint me your picture of the great vision of what this looks like. Maybe if you have any examples of some win stories you've seen by using this always on coaching.
So the metric that we are always so focused on is participation in quota. Are we getting 70% of our reps hitting 70% of their quota? That's our ideal scenario in the metric we're always trying to track. And it means that we are managing low performers. We are moving what we consider the frozen middle, which you talked about, into those top performers. And are we making sure we are creating efficient processes for those top performers to just go out and execute? And so the metric that I always like to look at when it comes to always on coaching is that participation rate.
Yeah.
I think you can also look at attrition. I am a strong believer that a strong coaching culture will lead to keeping those people in seat, those really strong performers happy at the company they're at. And you want to, because onboarding a new seller is difficult and time consuming, and ramp times are never short.
Yep.
So I like thinking about those metrics when I'm looking at this. Yeah, those are the big things I'm looking for.
I like the 70/70. It's easy to remember too. So that's very helpful.
70 on 70.
70 on 70. Okay. Love it. Frank, what does the perfect world look like?
So again, kind of going back to this, like what are the common pitfalls that I see? Like what are the common challenges that I see? And one of the biggest mistakes I think we make as leaders is we put the effort and the outcome really far apart from each other.
Mm.
And so we really fixate on like, did we hit our quota? Did we hit our bookings number? And the reality is, especially at the managerial level, sometimes at the rep level, they can't see how their day-to-day effort is connected back into that outcome that we want them to achieve. And so oftentimes what we're looking at is we're saying, hey, how far away is the outcome that we're looking for to the effort that we're asking this person to do? And yes, we need to connect it into the broader effort. But one of the biggest mistakes that we see in the coaching world, in my opinion, is that we say, hey, you need to move the needle on your quota. You need to move the needle on your quota. You need to move the needle on your quota. And then they get defeated because they're like, I'm doing it all right. I'm using the coaching framework. I'm listening to the calls, Frank. I'm not relying on AI, right? I'm showing up. I'm being disciplined. But the reality is change takes time, and it takes persistency and consistency. So aligning the KPIs with quantifiable impact and setting, in some cases, personalized and specific goals that link the outcome very close to the effort is really what helps move the needle for individual performers on the team all the way up through the organization. And so sometimes it's as simple in an individual conversation with a rep as saying, hey, on your next call, you really struggle when it gets to the pricing conversation. Let's just nail this pricing conversation and let's practice the pricing conversation, and then celebrating that win. Like
Yep.
now your effort was directly impacting your outcome and it resulted in a sales stage forward, as an example. Huge
Yep.
win. On the managerial side, we focus so much on bookings. But then we forget about the leading indicators. And the most obvious one is pipeline, right? But then others like vanity metrics, like is your team being consistent and persistent as they go? And so that's the way that I kind of think about this one in a broader sense, is like, as you're setting your KPIs, as you're thinking about your outcomes, don't lose the effort that's actually happening on the ground floor of your organization, and make sure that your outcomes align closely to the effort of your managers and your reps.
Yeah. I love
I
the idea too of not missing the effort in that, celebrating those small moments there where the improvement's happening, and the most improved kind of framework of thinking about, okay, it is a huge deal if I'm moving one of my bottom of the pack or even the frozen middle. Like that's a big impact to the business if you're moving them little by little up the ladder there. And Kelly, sorry, I jumped
Absolutely.
in right as you
Oh,
were about
no,
to.
no. I was just going to say, Frank, you just make such an important point that we, as leaders, oftentimes are thinking about those business outcomes, but it's the leading indicators that really matter in those small moments of growth. And I think it's important for coaches to think about what is the one thing you can change right now, and don't just tackle everything at once.
Yeah. Do either of you have a good mechanism, framework, or something that you do to recognize the manager for doing those things? Thinking about it can sometimes be incredibly stressful on the manager's front to go, okay, I need to improve discovery with this rep. I'm working on the pricing conversation with this rep over here. We're working on closing with this one. Like, how are you recognizing that your manager is doing a good job with coaching and keeping them motivated? Like, any tips or tricks for people there?
I would say one thing that we actually are talking a lot about at High Spot right now in our own internal go-to-market teams around sales plays. And so
Mm,
we've typically driven these really big initiatives, Frank, to your point, that require changes in all parts of the sales process. And I'm really focused on how do we slim that down? How do we create a sales play that is just focused on discovery or just focused on pipeline build? And so in those worlds, you can have those leading indicators that are bite size and you can report out on the success of those. And it matters to the executive team and to the rep.
yeah,
And so creating sales plays, I think, that are bite sized are really important when you're trying to actually put this into practice.
love that. Frank, what about you?
I love that, Kelly. I love that approach. It's like you can really get distilled down into the very specific things that you want to focus on and the levers that you want to pull. We take a very similar approach to a sales play. We just call it like a workflow. And we would think about kind of executing that in three parts. Operations, like the thing every salesperson hates, but operationally, what needs to happen in the systems, right? The second part, what's our messaging? What's our approach? How do we actually attack that? That's like maybe the sales play. And then the last piece is enablement. We built the operational process. The technology aligns to that. We have the perfect message or sales play. Now, how do we enable the organization to effectively execute the combination of those two things? But to answer your original question on like the change and kind of pulling it all together, we have developed a change framework that applies for coaching situations, for organizational change, and I love it. I love it. I love it. It's so good. And it's very memorable, and we call it the recipe for change. All right. So it's literally, here are the ingredients. All right. The first part is resource and plan. So who do I want the change to affect, and then how do I plan for that accordingly? So that's the R in recipe. And that could be literally, to Kelly's point earlier, what is the very specific coaching plan that I want this person to use? Then we always skip this step. It's the E, energize org. You got to get people excited and you got to
Love.
get them engaged. And you got to say, like, hey, what you're doing, your effort is directly related to this outcome and your impact, and you energize people. Then the C in recipe, make the change, actually make the change. But we energize people first, then we ask them to change. Then the I, integrate that change. So I'm coaching, I've energized them, I've asked them to make a change. Now I need to integrate that back into what their day to day. I need to use the call recording activities that I have, the consistency and persistency, AI. I need to use all those tools to truly integrate that into the change. The P is proof. Prove. This one's huge. Guess what? You made this change. You're excited about it. You're doing it differently. And here's the proof, it's working. You got to keep going, keep changing. Like it's what you're doing. You're on the right track. And then lastly is the E, and that's evolve. and evolve and scale. It's like now truly you've evolved into this new person and you're doing this new thing. Let's repeat, let's rinse and repeat. Let's go back to the process. Let's get energized. Let's change, let's integrate, and let's prove, and then kind of rinse and repeat from there. So we use this honestly for organizational change for some of our customers like Siemens. How do we get 40,000 people to do something different?
Mm.
We use it all the way down sometimes for an individual rep. Like, how do you integrate and get them excited about doing a coaching plan? And I love it. Maybe it's a mild commercial there, but it really works. And I'm a huge fan of the recipe for change.
I love this. I have all my notes now, so we're taking it back to the team here. Yeah, amazing. Thanks, Frank. That both
Of
of you
course.
guys, I'm filling up my notebook over here. I love this. All right, so we did get a question from the audience that got submitted, and I love both of your takes on this. So it says we utilize a ton of role playing within our company, and we'll add different constraints that are personalized to each rep. So really doing that personalized coaching. The example would be if there is a rep who has a hard time with talking too fast, their constraint they're given is you must pause for 1 to 2 seconds before starting to speak. Do either of you utilize anything similar when coaching your individual reps or managers, or have a go-to strategy to give the live feedback in those practice situations?
So I think what we're seeing here is very similar to what Frank talked about, is you're focused on one small skill within the larger picture. So you're not asking that rep to change everything about how they speak and how they perform, but you're asking them to make one small change. We don't do this today, but I do love it. And I think if you're using a formalized system like a sales LMS or creating rubrics, you can actually create these small changes and guidance
Mhm.
within that.
Love that. Frank, what are your thoughts?
Um, I don't have like a super distinct point of view on like this level of detail. I think it's fascinating though. Like,
Totally.
I'll tell you, my talk time, horrible, off the charts, like really bad. And so, I'm always looking at my stats and I'm like, oh God, I gotta shut up. I gotta let the other person talk a little bit more. And I've gotten better at it over time
Yep.
through a lot of like self-loathing and beating myself up. I'm kidding. I like this though. I've never seen anybody get that specific in their coaching plans, but to Kelly's point, I think it's really like context is key. Like context is key. Like making sure that you're situationally applying a very specific thing to that person's very specific weakness so that they can sharpen their skills.
Yeah.
And there is no one size fits all to coaching, and using the tools that you have to be able to situationally tailor infinite numbers of combinations and permutations of different people's strengths, skill sets, etc., is the best way to do it. So Jacob, I love it. And I've never done that specifically, but it sounds awesome.
Yeah. Really cool. I love the personalized element of that. Okay. We're coming to the end here. If you have other questions, please feel free to throw them in the chat. But we're going to do a rapid fire. We're going to put these two on the spot. So we're going to start with what is the top sales skill to master before 2025? I'll have Kelly go first on this one.
Okay, I'm going to go with authenticity. So my prediction is, as a buyer, we are going to become very skeptical of AI. And we're going to question who wrote the email, who sent the video, who created the digital sales room. And so the more authentic a seller can be on a call, which I think comes with confidence. So they need to be confident, which means they need to do call prep. The better reps will do. People buy from people. That is not changing. Sales job is staying. I believe it's here to stay. And I think those individuals who can be really authentic in the way they sell will be very successful. And we need to make sure we give space for new sellers to learn who they are as a seller and become really authentic.
I love that. I agree with your prediction too. I even now I see some of those emails from an SDR, and I'm like, did a human write this? I'm not totally sure. Can't tell. Okay, Frank, I'd love to hear your top sales skill and if you have a prediction.
How am I supposed to follow that one? That was so genuine, Kelly. I like loved it. I agree with you. Authenticity, top of the list. I would maybe revert back and say to something I said earlier, and really discipline. These tools that we have access to now are designed to help us and support us, but they're not a substitute for hard work. And I see so many people now finding they think the hack or the cheat code or the workaround or the time saver or the cut to be able to get something more fast or more effective. And then what happens is they show up to calls unprepared. And so there is no substitute for hard work. There really isn't. And it takes discipline and persistency and consistency in sales to achieve an outcome that you want to achieve. And so use the tools to your advantage to help make you better and more well-rounded and to uplift what you're doing and to make you work more efficiently. But don't use it as a substitute for hard work because there is no substitute for hard work and stay disciplined. That's what I would say.
I love this. Okay. Once again, I'm taking all these notes. So, our sellers, when we go, I'm like, this is wonderful. When we go into 2025, our goal is our reps are going to be their authentic selves. They're going to have their discipline. They're going to be super prepared and they're going to go crush their calls. And our managers, they're going to be doing personalized coaching. They're going to have that recipe for changing the behavior, changing their org, and they're going to keep their human intelligence to complement all of the tools and processes we give them. I think that sounds amazing.
Whoa.
I think we just did
Whoa.
it. Yeah.
Yeah.
We're good. We're good to go. I love it. Well, thank you all so much for joining us today. We're coming to the end of our hour. If there are any other questions, I'm keeping an eye on the chat. Oh, and Jacob has a prediction
Mhm.
here. The
Follow
power
up.
is in the follow-up. Yes, that's
Agree
a
with
great
that too.
prediction as well. Yep. Love it. If anyone else wants to drop a prediction or a question, please feel free to do so. Thank you so much to Frank and Kelly for giving us all of their wisdom on how they impact organizations and how they help all of these sellers and all of these managers find success and find sort of the methods of the future. Don't forget, if you would like to join us in Nashville in October, for our coaching conference, we do have a discount code. It brings your peak ticket down to $99. It is a lot of fun. It includes your meals, your happy hour, the live band, the entertainment. It is a perfect Nashville style event. So please feel free to reach out to me if you have any other questions about ambition and peak coming up. We would love to see any and all of you there. But yeah, once again, a big thank you to our panelists, Kelly and Frank, for taking time to join us and for granting us all of their wisdom. I absolutely learned a lot. I think we all did. And yes, Elizabeth, this recording can be shared. So we will send this out with the follow up so that you can go back and reference all of this. Awesome. All right, everyone, enjoy your Tuesday and thank you for being here today. Take care.
Thanks, everyone.